Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Oh, it feels so good to be back. You might have noticed I took a little bit of a break from YouTube. Honestly, the stress was getting to me and I wanted to have a break just because I thought it was having a bit of a negative impact on my mental health, but I didn't expect that break to really highlight to me just how much I love doing YouTube. I love recording videos, I love editing them, doing thumbnails, like getting them up. I really love it, regardless of what my engagement and stats are like. Honestly, deep down, the only thing that really matters to me is just how much I enjoy doing this and talking about books and documenting parts of my life that I like looking back on myself. Anyway, this isn't what this video is about. Although I will say, I'm not quite finished. I've actually bought myself a DJI pocket camera, so I was hoping to actually be filming on this today. Unfortunately, it doesn't come with an SD card, but you need one to record on it. So that's a bit of a flop. So hopefully the next video you watch, I'll be using my brand new camera, which I'm so excited about. But anyway, that's probably not why you've clicked on this video, to hear me ramble. You've clicked on this video to find out my 2024 reading wrap up. I'm going to be talking about my favourite 5-star reads, some honourable mentions, and also the books that I really did not like of this year. Plus, let's throw some stats in there, why not? So total books I have read this year is, according to Goodreads, 60, but I know that's not actually right because, well, on Fable it says 63, which is quite a difference. But I know on Goodreads it didn't register for some reason that I read Happy Place this year. So I'm going to lean more towards what Fable said, because Fable said I read 63 books. And I also read, well, roughly a total of 24,984 pages. The shortest book I read this year is Powerful by Lauren Roberts, which was the novella for her Powerless series, and I absolutely loved this book. I'm actually surprised it's the shortest book I read though. I thought I'd read something a bit shorter, but obviously not. The longest one easily is Kingdom of Ash. That was 992 pages. I am shook of that I basically read an 1,000-page book, but I have no regrets. That was literally insanely epic. And the average book length that I read was 416 pages, which I feel like is pretty good. I feel like that is the average book length, so clearly I've just read majority of that, and then some a little less, some a little more. My most popular shelved book is Little Women. That had over 4 million shelves. I don't know if that's this year or overall in general, but that is crazy. And funnily enough, that wasn't even the whole book of Little Women. That was only the first half of them in their childhood, because I didn't realize you could actually buy those parts of the story separate, so I still need to read the second half of that. And the least shelved was the Gingerbread Cafe, which only had 1,600 shelves. I read that really recently. It was kind of underwhelming. I didn't realize how unpopular it was though. I just picked it up from the works because it looked cute. My highest rated book on Goodreads, also still comes as no surprise, is again Kingdom of Ash. That had an average rating of 4.79 stars, which is insane. Like, that has got to be one of the highest books on Goodreads, surely. My average rating for the year was 3.7. Again, I feel that's a pretty good average rating. It's closer to 4 stars. I feel like I always have a lot of 4-star reads or like 3.5-star reads. I don't throw out 5 stars willy-nilly, and I feel like I don't tend to reach for books I know I'm not gonna like. Most of the time I'm quite good with my radar. So, and then moving on to Fable, because they just had a couple of other stats that I really like to look at. So there's a reader summary that they gave me, which I feel like this is based more on your recent reads than overall, I'm not sure, but mine says that I'm a cozy magic seeker. I have an insatiable thirst for magical adventures intertwined with love and a sprinkle of danger. I fear your couch might actually manifest as a portal to such realms if we don't keep an eye on it. Which, to be fair, I feel like that is so accurate. Then there's just like an overview of all the kind of books that I've read throughout the year, how many I read each month, which I thought was really interesting. I definitely had a really good reading month recently. In the month of December, I was just eating up all the different festive books this month. And then weirdly enough, I also read a lot in March, which is very random. Don't know why, but clearly I was just having a good time. Also, no surprise that my most popular genre is romance, closely followed by fantasy, and then young adult, which pretty much sums up the majority of my reading habits. So checks out. And my most read authors, Sarah J Maas, has obviously stormed this one with 9 books, because I read the entire Throne of Glass series, and then I also read House of Flame and Shadow at the beginning of the year. So let's start with the books that I have just eaten up and adored this year. There is quite a good selection. It is pretty much all either fantasy or romance. Those are the books that this girl likes to read, so I guess that makes sense for me. So let's start with a big boy, because we're talking more about a series here, I guess, than we are a book. but that is the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J Maas. I did this whole series this year. Hasn't actually been that long since I finished Kingdom of Ash, and oh my god, that was an 100% 5-star read to me. You just can't, I just don't know how I can ever really find a fantasy series that is just as ace as this one is. Like, the character development is unmatched, and I feel like it's not just the main character. We have got so many characters that we're following in these books that we are like so invested in and that go on such a journey. I feel like real characters. Like, Sarah J Maas just nails it. Like, after reading all of her series, ACOTAR is still my number one, but this one is such a close second. And ironically, when I go back through my ratings, I only actually rated 3 of the books 5 stars. The rest are like 4 stars, 4.5 stars. Towards the end is when they're getting the 5-star feeling though, because I just love these characters so much. And you get to a point in the series where, like I say, they feel so real and the emotions were just so deep. Like, the ending of Empire of Storms, I don't think I will ever be the same after reading that. My heart literally split in two. But yeah, if you're looking for your sign to read this series, because I know so many people find it intimidating, and like, I get it. When I started the tandem read, I was like, is this actually going to be possible for me? Like, can I manage that? And I did, and it was great, and I have no regrets. This series is just so good, and you absolutely must read it if you're thinking about it for 2025. This is your sign. And a complete 180, the next book is Daydream by Hannah Grace. Again, it's just the emotions for me. Like, I get so connected and attached to a book when it has that emotional depth to it, and I really wasn't expecting it from Hannah Grace with this one. I loved all of the other books in this trilogy, but they do all have that higher element of like spice and just like banter, because you know, they're like hockey romances, college romances. There's gonna always be that like little cheeky element and that fun, but whilst this is obviously still following characters who are on hockey teams and are still at college, the depth that Hannah Grace brought to this one is so unlike the other 2 books. So if you didn't like Icebreaker or Wildfire, I would still give this one a go, because it is like a completely different vibe and shift, but it's my favourite in the trilogy easily. I related to both of these characters so much, and I felt so strongly following their stories and their struggles, and like, you just want to get like jump in this book and give them a hug, but also you want them to come and give you a hug, because it's like, I relate to you so much. Depth aside, it was just still a lovely little romance read, and I was really rooting for these 2 characters from the offset. Hallie's a Swiftie, people pleaser, bookworm girly, like hello, and Henry just had such a cheeky, arrogant side to him, but like in the best way. I love this one. Another romance that I literally haven't stopped thinking about actually is Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. I'm getting through her books so slowly. I'm literally reading 1 a year. I need to change that next year. She's got another book coming out next year. I still haven't read Just for the Summer. Like, we are gonna be in our Abby Jimenez era next year. It absolutely has to happen. Again, I'm gonna go on about that emotional depth, because apparently that's all my 5-star ratings are emotional books. The generosity of Jacob in this book, and you find that on so early. It's literally about 2 doctors and Bree, our main character, a little bit frosty, but her brother is currently on the search for a kidney transplant. I think it's a kidney transplant, or he needs a kidney donor, basically. This obviously means so much to Bree. He's not himself anymore. He's deteriorated so much, and it breaks her heart to see her brother become this like shell of a person. And then enter Jacob, who also works at the same hospital. He's brand new, he's just transferred over, and he's so precious. He suffers so much with anxiety, but he's also just the most generous human being ever. And look, I mean, you can read as much on the blurb as you like, but also I feel like I don't want to go too much into this, because I went in completely blind and I was just so shocked at the contents of inside, like just how, like I say, generous Jacob is, and their love story is just so pure. I also feel like Abby Jimenez does that perfect blend of like funny banter, but also having depth to it as well. It's just the perfect romance read for me, and so far I've read 2 books from Abby Jimenez and I've rated both of them 5 stars, so what does that tell you? We are heavier on the romance than I thought at the beginning of this video, because the next book that I want to talk about is Happy Place by Emily Henry, and guess what? It had emotional depth. This was 100% a right book at the right time read. I related to Harriet so much in this book when I read it. It follows Harriet and Wynne and their group of friends. Every year they've always gone to this holiday home. They spend a week together on vacation and they just have a really fun time. There's 6 of them and it's like 3 couples. They're all in relationships with each other kind of thing. Harriet and Wynne, one of those relationships, they've actually split up and they are obviously, as usual, invited to this annual holiday and they don't want to tell their friends that they've actually split up. So they kind of sort of fake date, but they basically pretend that they are still engaged for the sake of the holiday. And this is another book that doesn't just follow those main characters. You end up really caring and rooting for all the side characters as well in this one because they're just all connected in such special ways. They're all battling such difficult things in their lives, and particularly Harriet, I remember there's quite a lot in this book about her just feeling like what is her life? You know that thing when you're an adult and you're like what am I doing with my life? What is my life? Sister, I feel you with that. That was literally me at the time I read this. That probably influenced why I loved this so much and why I gave it a 5-star at the time. But I mean, look how much I tabbed this. Like, I'm not the biggest book tabber and I tabbed the living shit out of this because it was just so relatable. It made my heart melt. It made my heart break. It's just such a special story about 6 people who are just trying to find their way in the world. And yeah, I wouldn't say the cover, if you don't know anything about this book or Emily Henry, the cover is giving summer fun. This isn't summer fun. This is summertime sadness, but it was worth every page that I read. So I could not recommend this enough. This is probably like a top 3 read of this year. That is how good it was. Finally, onto another slightly different genre now. We're moving on to YA fantasy, and that is Powerless by Lauren Roberts. I read this for the first time this year and have since devoured the other 2 books that have come out so far. This was my favourite one out of the 3 that I have read so far. It is, oh my god, it's so good. I actually literally just got goosebumps talking about it and I'm not even joking. This follows Payton, who is an ordinary. She doesn't have any special abilities, but she is living in a world full of, oh my god, what are their names? Elites who do have special powers, and ordinaries are trying to be squashed from the society. Like, they are getting murdered. The Throne believe that ordinaries carry a specific disease that puts their powers in jeopardy. So all of the ordinaries are getting executed to eliminate that risk. In this world, there is a sort of competition tournament that is held, I believe, every year where elites get to basically just showcase their powers. Someone comes out on top. And Payton is entered into this competition, even though she has no powers and she's just basically been pretending to be an elite so that she can survive. So we've got a trial. I love trials in books. They are one of my favourite structures for a fantasy. If there's like a trial or a competition, I'm gonna eat it up. But this one was just done so well because it was also married with the romance between Payton and Kai, who is a prince. And oh god, it's just so good. The banter, the tension, the action, the plot is giving, the romance is giving. It was so emotional. The ending also just shattered me. Like, I feel like I say that I'm not that much of a crier when it comes to books, and I don't think I am, but I feel like this year I've shed a few tears, but then I look at the books I shed tears over and I'm like, absolute masterpiece. And this was a masterpiece. I ate this up. I could not recommend it enough if you're looking for a bit of an easier fantasy to get into, because I would consider this almost like, I want to call it urban fantasy, even though it doesn't actually take place in real life. Like, it's a made up world, but it just doesn't, it's not difficult to follow. There's no crazy magic systems. It's just human people that possess powers. I love this and would really recommend it if you're looking for a bit of a tamer, but definitely not slower pace and definitely not lame fantasy read. Another book I rated 5 stars, and I'm going to skim over this one purely because if I read it again, would it be a lower rating? I'm not sure, but I did give Icebreaker by Hannah Grace 5 stars this year. So another entry by Miss Hannah Grace. But I always say this is one of those books where I say I rated it 5 stars, and if someone was to ask me like why, like what reasons do I have behind it, I'm kind of like, don't know. It just gave me such a fun, kicking my feet, giggling feeling, and there's pretty much no plot. You are essentially just following these characters. It's a hockey romance at college. Anastasia is a figure skater and Nate is a hockey player, but I could not stop reading it. I was literally glued to the page. And I think I described it in a previous video that it just felt in a way like nostalgic. I mean, I didn't even go to college. I definitely wasn't into sports. Neither was my partner at the time, but there's just something so heartwarming and like nostalgic for me to read a book about teens in college and like a romance and just that whole academic vibe, like, but in a fun way. And they've got like parties at the weekends and they're like drinking and having a good time. And I don't know, that I love reading about that, because it just takes me back to when I was a little bit younger, a little bit more fun. I actually liked to go out on the weekends because it was just like new and it was a novelty. So that's why I gave it a 5-star. It's just purely on vibes, because I can't deny I did eat it up. So it's testament to the book. I had an amazing time. A light-hearted read, quite a bit of spice. If you're into that, then give this one a go. I'm going to talk about the next 2 books together because they are as part of a series, and that is Heartless and Powerless by Elsie Silver. I pretty much, other than Flawless, read the whole series of Chestnut Springs this year, and wow, what a time. I would easily just go and reread all of these again, especially these 2. I am down so bad for the male main characters in these books. First of all, you've got Heartless. This follows Willa and Cade. Cade is one of the Eaton brothers. He's the oldest. He's a single dad. He's a bit grumpy and he's looking for a nanny. So enter Willa. She comes over, basically looks after his child Luke and integrates herself into their family. It's spicy, it's fun. I loved Willa as a character, and I also loved the way that Elsie Silver wrote Luke the child, because I feel like writing children into romance books can be a bit risky sometimes. Sometimes they just don't get the language right, or it becomes more of a hindrance to the plot of the love story. But Luke had such a great involvement in their love story, and oh, Cade, the man you are. I seriously need to reread this because I'm forgetting a little bit some of the moments between Willa and Cade, and I mean I've tabbed them, so see, yeah, I'm going back and I'm reading some of these tabs and I'm like, oh yes, I remember now. If Willa is the playground I want to fucking play. Amazing. Simple, but very effective. And then following on from Heartless, there is Powerless. And this is actually, I'm going to say, my favourite in the Chestnut Springs series. It's also the chunkiest. I feel like it's also the one that's most commonly rated the least by people, but I loved this. I think I am definitely a childhood friends to lovers kind of girl. I love a romance book where the characters have history, and even if I don't know the complete ins and outs of their history, as long as we get a few little crumbs and flashbacks, like, I'm a happy girl. There's just something about, yeah, knowing characters that have grown up together, know each other inside out, who are finally coming in to their romance together. And this was one of those books. It follows Jasper and Sloane. Jasper is kind of, he's not an official Eaton brother, but he's been kind of unofficially adopted by their dad. And Sloane, who is the cousin to the Eaton brothers, but they're very close. She often comes down. She's a ballerina, and Jasper is a hockey player. But Jasper's another one of these characters that there's a lot more going on underneath the surface, and you do get to dive into that. And vulnerability in characters in a romance book, I think, just gives the story so much more credibility, so much more, I hate using the word depth all the time, but depth. I just feel like getting to see those different layers to a character, obviously it makes it more relatable and more realistic. Jasper can do both. Like, he has the very sensitive soft side to him. He obviously knows and cares for Sloane so much, but he's also got another very nice side to him. Oh, I've just read another quote. See, the quotes in these books are just so good. See, Sloane, you can wear someone else's ring, but we both know you've always been mine. Not a spoiler, by the way. She runs out of her wedding in like the first chapter. But anyway, another amazing read. Highly recommend. And then the last one that I'm going to talk about in terms of like my favourite, my 5-star reads. And this book I read in January, like the very beginning of this year, and I think about it almost every day. It's one of those books as well where it's been almost a year later and I could tell you so much about this book because that's how much it's just stayed with me. And I feel like sometimes I can read a book, rate it 5 stars, love it at the time, ask me in 6 months, I couldn't tell you anything about it. But The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, oh my god. I also hear people being intimidated by this book. It is quite thick. It is kind of a slow burn. Like, it does take place over so many hundreds and hundreds of years, and it does take a while to kind of build up Addie's backstory, but oh my god, I swear to you, it is so worth it. It follows a girl called Addie LaRue. She's born, I believe, in the 1700s, and we meet her as she's being forced into an arranged marriage, as it was in those days. Addie doesn't want this for herself. She wants freedom, and she manages to run away from her wedding. The consequence of running into the devil, essentially, just like a demon who makes a bargain with her and says, look, you can run away from your wedding, and you can have freedom, but you have to be immortal and you have to be forgettable. So Addie accepts this and she lives a life of immortality, but every single person she meets, every single person she sees, they will forget about her. Even if she saw someone, even if she sat in a restaurant, ordered a meal, the second that person lays eyes off of her, she's forgotten. So it's a very, very difficult life for her to navigate, and you follow her entire journey navigating that up until present day in New York. She eventually bumps into a guy called Henry in present day, and he remembers her. So we're trying to unravel that mystery. It's beautiful, it's so touching, it's emotional. The writing is so whimsical and lyrical. I loved the writing from V.E. Schwab. I could talk about this book all day. There's twists. I sobbed my heart out at the end of it. Perfect book, honestly. I seriously need to read more now from V.E. Schwab, even though I fear nothing will top this because I adored this. And even though it is a slightly bigger book, I would easily reread this, and in fact maybe I will, because even though I don't really want to feel the pain that I felt reading this, I don't think I'm ever going to find another book like it. It's just completely in its own league. I'm obsessed with it. I really recommend this. Now for some honourable mentions. These are books that didn't quite get a 5-star rating from me, but books that I still really enjoyed, or books that I didn't love but I could really appreciate, were quite unique and would maybe suit a different audience. So a book that I did really enjoy and that I just had to mention in this video because it is also just so unique is Butcher and Blackbird by Bryn Weaver. It follows 2 serial killers. They're kind of like, is it a vigilante the right word? They kill people who are bad people. Like they kill other murderers or people that commit really heinous crimes. A bit like Dexter, I guess. They make a little competition with each other. So once a year they select a target, and the first person to essentially kill that person wins the competition for that year. But naturally, as they're spending so much time together, romance begins to blossom. And let me tell you, Rowan, the male main character from this book, he is so down bad for Sloane at the beginning, and I loved it. Like, I ate it up. Also, I just loved the concept. Like, this is something that I don't often read anything about, and I'm a girly who loves the series You on Netflix, so before I picked this up I thought this is probably going to be a bit of me, and it definitely was. There's quite a bit of gore. I mean, not too much. They tend to be contained within their own chapters. So there's like a couple of chapters where it's pretty explicitly explained what the characters are currently looking at and dealing with, but it didn't bother me. If anything, it just added fun to the story. So yes, I adored this and would really recommend it if you're looking for a slightly different romance, something's a bit darker, definitely still funny, and just a concept that you don't really ever read about. Another book that is 100% not ever a genre I ever really reach for, and that I have not stopped thinking about since I read it, is Pet Sematary by Stephen King. I read this year for Halloween because I just decided, you know what, I want to go for it and read one of his books. I've always found them so intimidating. It's not a genre I ever really want to read. Maybe other than at Halloween, I've read the odd horror every now and then. I am so glad that I picked that book up because wow, that was an experience. And when I read it, I rated it 4.5, but to be fair, I probably could rate that a 5-star, reflecting back at just how much of my brain that book has occupied. It is twisty, it makes your hairs stand up on edge, but it's also got such a deeper meaning. It really gets you thinking. It explores the whole avenues of grief. It's a book about a man who moves in with his family into a new town, and their house is situated right next door really to a pet cemetery. So it's a cemetery where people for generations have come to bury their deceased pets. Sounds somewhat sweet, but there are darker forces at play here, and things are definitely not all they seem. I'm gonna leave it at that because I think it's so much better to go into that book blind. I wouldn't want to spoil anything because the amount of times my jaw hit the floor was just unreal, and I am so excited for anyone who decides to pick Pet Sematary up and read it for the first time, because I had the best reading experience. I really liked Stephen King's writing. He was really masterful in the way that he kind of writes the characters in a way where you do genuinely kind of care for them, and it just makes reading it so much more scary because I really don't want bad things to happen to these characters. And spoiler alert, they do. Yeah, I would highly recommend reading that book. I haven't been able to bring myself to watch the movie yet. I don't know if I ever will. I'm definitely not a horror movie girly. They are way too scary for me. But yeah, the book was such an amazing experience. I would really recommend it if you want to get into horror or explore authors that you wouldn't normally read from. Next, I want to talk about Check and Mate by Ali Hazelwood. I've read the majority of books from her, and I've got to say, for the most part, I've just found them, I've been kind of indifferent. I've had a good time with them, but they've never really stuck out in my head. But her venture into YA, I really enjoyed. This follows Mallory and Nolan. I didn't begin with an N. Mallory and Nolan. Mallory is from a family who's lacking financial stability, and she has an opportunity to start playing chess professionally and earning money from it, from tournaments. But chess has a big sentimental place in Mallory's heart. It's something she used to do with her dad before he passed away, and so following the kind of moral struggles she has in her own head with her feelings towards chess, navigating that with her family struggles, meeting Nolan and their relationship that develops throughout the duration of this book. It was really sweet. It was funny. It was interesting. Like, I feel like a book about chess people would easily turn their noses up at, but I actually really enjoyed this, and I thought it still included quite a bit of chess talk, but it was done in a way that was still understandable and digestible. It just added more credibility to the story and made it seem so much more realistic and immersive, and I really appreciated that. So I loved this one. This was I would definitely read more YA from Ali Hazelwood for sure. I would also love to mention Belladonna by Adeline Grace. I read this in the autumn time, and my god, what a perfect time to read this book. It is gothic, it is dark, it is gloomy, it's quite eerie in places. I was, at the time, quite obsessed with this actually, and I'm very excited to continue the series. It follows a girl not called Belladonna actually. It follows a girl called Signa who's grown up her entire life around death. Everyone she seems to get involved with, everyone she kind of comes close to, has a relationship with, they die. And essentially she's pretty much the only person left in her entire family at this point, and she gets invited to Thorngrove, where I think she has one more distant relative. And while she's there, she's basically trying to figure out why this is happening to her, because she could also see death himself. And while she's at Thorngrove, lo and behold, another person starts to become fatally ill, but it appears that there's actually something even more sinister going on behind the scenes. So it's kind of like a murder mystery, trying to figure out why people are becoming so fatally ill, but also following Signa's relationship with death, which I found really odd, and it did make me feel a little bit uneasy at first, but you do eventually get used to seeing them two having a relationship, and by the end of it I was very invested. I remember there was a couple of quotes in this book that did kind of floor me. And it was the atmosphere that Adeline Grace created in this book. Like I say, it was so gothic and gloomy. I loved it. And I remember sitting in bed reading this and actually closing it for a second and sitting there and being like, wow, like this is really well written, and it genuinely borderline freaked me out for a bit. I didn't expect to get that much of a strong feeling from this book, so I thought it was done very, very well. And now it's time to talk about the books that did not impress me at all. I'm actually really sad to say there's quite a few. I don't want to make this video sound negative. Reading is so subjective, and I know all the books that I haven't liked this year, so many people have rated highly, have loved, have enjoyed, and that is so great for them. Me, however, these books didn't hit. So we're going to start off with the very first book that I actually picked up this year. So it really wasn't a great start to my reading year, because I ended up DNFing this after I was a good chunk through it. And that is From Lukov with Love by Mariana Zapata. I hated this book. I can't believe I persevered as much as I did, because I think I only had like 150 pages left of this when I DNF'd it, and it's a thick book. I could not stand the characters. Like, they make me angry just thinking about them. It follows two figure skaters, and they're put together in a couple to compete for a competition, if my memory serves me. They were so immature and petty and childish, just so unlikable for me. I just could not read about them. I just couldn't. And I did not see any chemistry between them. I really, really disliked the main male character more than the female. I can't remember their names, but I thought he was just so pompous and just mean. I didn't like him. I didn't like the two characters at all. I didn't really have a problem with the writing, so maybe I do need to give another one of her books a try, because people love Mariana Zapata's books, But this one has seriously put me off because I think reading this is the most angry I've been reading a book for a long time. Like, it was infuriating. I just did not like them two as characters at all. And yeah, ended up DNFing this book because I'd had enough. I'd had enough. The next one is Bride by Ali Hazelwood, which is funny because I have given her an honourable mention in this video, but it's funny, she's now dipped her toes into so many different genres. Unfortunately, Bride was not the one for me. I believe it falls under the Omegaverse, and it follows a romance between a vampire and a werewolf. Finished this book. I rated it at 2 stars. Omegaverse isn't for me, okay? And I love the people that can enjoy it. For me, it was too graphic, and I haven't quite recovered from some of the things I read from that book. And that's a me problem. We'll leave it at that. It just wasn't for me. But if you love a detailed, I say detailed, apparently that's quite tame, but a more graphic, logistic werewolf vampire romance, then you may love Bride. But I found it also boring. Didn't vibe with that kind of romance, and that is okay. One that I'm so sad, like so sad to even mention, because I wanted to love this book, is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. I was so upset when I realised that I didn't like this book, like so upset. I almost want to give it another go, try and prove myself wrong, because I wanted to love this. The cover in itself, I'm sorry, I know covers are meaningless in a way, but they're not also, because, you know, look how pretty. It follows Emily Wilde, who is a professor. I think she's a professor, or she's like a scholar, and she's basically trying to create her very own encyclopedia of fairies. She wants to travel around different regions and districts, and she wants to document all the different things that she finds out about nature and creatures and everything within the world, really. It writes like a journal. So it is literally like you're reading her journal as she is venturing through these lands and making these discoveries. And she also does it alongside her academic rival, Bamblebee. They have a little romance side plot. But yeah, I knew this was cozy fantasy, and I like cozy fantasy. I've read cozy fantasy before, really enjoyed it, really fun time when you know that's what you're getting into. But I found the writing in this just absolutely destroyed the story, because I think the plot was absolutely fine. I had no issues with the plot. I just could not get past the writing. It was so wordy. And now that I know that, like I say, I'm wondering if I could maybe reread it and have a different perspective, knowing that going in, and just knowing that I've got to use a bit more brain power to really absorb what's being written. It really just took away from the whole story for me, and I'm so upset about it. So I don't even want to talk about this anymore, because it makes me so upset that I didn't like it. I'm going to try and give it another go, and I'm actually also going to try and continue reading the series. Now that I know what to expect, maybe I'll have a different experience, but yeah, gutted about this one. Oh gosh, okay. These are 2 books I read so close together. It was honestly painful having such shit read experiences right next to each other. The first one is Can't Spell Treason Without Tea. This I actually got as an ARC from NetGalley, so I feel really bad giving it a bad review, but I think it had been published beforehand, but it was just before it was being traditionally published. This book was so boring. It was so disconnected. I can't actually remember that much about it. I just remember powering through for the sake of being lucky enough to be gifted an ARC copy, but it was, yeah. Didn't enjoy this one at all. If you want to read a cozy fantasy that this one advertises, honestly, go and read Legends and Lattes. For me, that was done so much better. And then True Love at the Lonely Hearts Bookshop. This was the other book of the year that made me so angry, like so angry. I can't remember the characters' names. Basically, the female main character fake dates the male main character because her friends are like feeling sorry for her. She's in her 30s, I think, and she hasn't had a romantic relationship really ever, and there's a lot of weddings coming up and events, so she basically fake dates this guy who she bumps into at a restaurant to help each other out because he's got other reasons why having a girlfriend would be beneficial for him. He is horrible. He is pompous. He literally leads her on throughout the entire book because he's also got another girl that he's pining for, and strings on our female main character. And then when she wants to talk to him about things, like, oh no, I can't though because this other girl, and it's like, oh my god, infuriating. He treats her so badly. And then at the end of the book, spoiler alert guys, I mean, it's a romance, so what do you expect? But she just literally within the same chapter is like having a go at him for being such an arsehole. And I'm like, yes, go on girl, tell him. And then within the same chapter, by the end of it, she's with him. And I'm like, what? It was infuriating. Hated it. It made me so mad. Another one that I was really hoping to love, and just didn't get the hype is The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. It's another series that I don't think I'm going to say goodbye to yet. I want to try and persevere. However, since reading this and being on socials, I feel like so many people have got the same opinion. I know so many people now that have read this and were like, it was so underwhelming, did not live up to the hype that it's been given on TikTok and stuff. And I'm sorry, but I've got to agree. I think I gave it a 2.5 star. I was switching off for a lot of this. I actually found it a little bit boring. I felt like nothing really happened throughout the majority of the book. Like, it had a crazy beginning, a crazy ending, and everything in the middle for me was just so boring, so lackluster. Where is the romance? I feel like this is literally hyped up online because everyone's like, it is such a great romantasy. Sorry? The characters literally talk to each other like twice throughout the entirety of this book. So tell me how that is giving romantasy. I don't know. I don't quite understand it myself. But I know so many people love this series and it's like some people's absolutely like favourite fantasy of all time. I'm gonna try and persevere because I do think the female main character and the male one, to be fair, have got such promise to be really great characters, but so far I haven't witnessed that. It follows, by the way, I haven't said, it follows Jude, who comes from a family and her parents have been murdered and she gets taken away with her sister into this fantasy fae realm, and as a human she basically needs to find ways to survive in this fae dominated court because she's faced with some pretty challenging characters. But yes, this definitely flopped for me. I was expecting so much more from this book and I didn't get it, unfortunately. And the last one I want to talk about is The Cinnamon Bun Bookstore by Laurie Gilmore. This book just left me feeling frustrated. It was kind of an easy read, which is all I look for really from these books, but it was set in the summertime. Even though it's literally called The Cinnamon Bun Bookstore, like the most autumnal, cozy sounding book known to man, and it's set in summer. I also just found the plot so repetitive. Like, it was literally following the exact formula about 4 times over before we got to the ending. And yeah, like I say, one of the main things I come to these books for is the atmosphere and the scene that it sets, but it was literally set in summer. So it wasn't giving cozy autumn romance, and that was a massive bummer. But yes, those are all the books I wanted to kind of wrap up and talk to you guys about. I hope you enjoyed this video and made it this far. Thank you so much for watching. And if you are a long-term viewer, as I say, hopefully next time when you see me, I'll be filming on this new camera and it will just elevate things a bit more. I think I'm going to really enjoy making content more when it's on a camera, not on my phone. So I'm really looking forward to this new journey. This camera is also so cool. Like, look at this, right? Okay, sorry. I know you didn't come here for this, but wait. It's like a freaking robot. Yeah, low-key obsessed with that. I hope you've all had an amazing Christmas and an amazing year. Let me know in the comments about your favourite reads from this year or just your favourite moments, honestly. Like, let's reflect. I'm going to be posting a sort of like New Year reset kind of video. I'm going to be talking about all that kind of stuff. But yeah, if you want to, let me know in the comments what your favourite moment of this year was and definitely what your favourite reads were. And I will catch you next time with a brand new video. Bye, friends!